Look, I worked with Benjamin Netanyahu when he was finance minister many years ago. My worry is that he's surrounded by a group of people who actually cannot see anything other than a one-state solution. And perhaps that's where he is now. It wasn't entirely where he was when I used to talk to him. But what we've got to do is understand that those people who are supporting or opposing a two-state solution, and that's Hamas, and those people surrounding the Netanyahu government from the extreme right, they've got to be isolated by the force of worldwide opinion. And it can't just be the Americans. It's got to be the Middle East countries. China and Asia have got to be supportive of this, and Europe, of course. And so we've got to build a coalition that isolates those who oppose the only way forward that I see, which is a two-state solution. Now, I don't underestimate the difficulties, because Israel is in trauma as a result of what happened to it. It always thought its security could be protected, and it was not happening when we had these massacres. And the Palestinians, I'm afraid that we're breeding Hamas too, because what's going to happen is that the young people are growing up aware of their fathers, their mothers, their brothers and sisters dying as innocent civilians in this. So we have got huge difficulties to overcome. But my message to world leaders is, do not give up on the idea that the only way forward is a two-state solution. And we can talk about temporary measures, ceasefires and so on and so forth, but unless we focus on the lasting, enduring solution to this problem, we will still have the problem many years from now.
What about the ramifications beyond in the region? And of course, we're seeing strikes from the UK and the US on the Houthi rebels.
Well, this could explode into all sorts of countries in the region. I mean, it's not just what's happening in Yemen with the Houthi rebels. It's also what could happen in Syria, Iran, Iraq. You know, it really is a problem. And I do applaud what Antony Blinken is trying to do, which is trying to calm things down. But again, I do come back to this, that there is always going to be the potential for a flare-up as long as we don't have a clear view of what kind of peace there is going to be in the region. The danger is that violent extremism, religious extremism is back in a way that perhaps was obscured by what was happening with COVID and the energy crisis in Ukraine, and perhaps we should have been paying far more attention to that over the last few years.
Do we have the leaders to actually do it, do you feel? And of course, there are elections happening in the UK, in the US, all over the world. Do you think, going back to the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak will have to resign soon because of the opposition we saw last night against the Rwanda bill?
Well, let's start with where we're going to be by the end of this year. Nothing is going to be resolved until the American elections are resolved. So until people are clear who the next president is going to be, then it's difficult for you to think of long-term answers that can stick. So if he were to be President Trump, again president, decides to leave NATO or decides to leave the IMF or the World Bank, puts a 10% tariff as he's threatening on trade, then you're into an era of trade wars and technology wars and industrial subsidy wars, and it could go out of hand. So I think the biggest decision, of course, that we're waiting for this year, of course, there's elections in India, Indonesia, Mexico, right across the European Union, where you've got a populist, nationalist sort of a group of parties competing for power, doing a lot better than they were a few years ago, partly because of immigration. All these things have happened, but I think you've got to focus on what will happen in America as a first instance, and then you could look at other countries.
If Trump is re-elected as president, are you worried for democracy?
I think I'm worried about the threat of a Trump presidency in the sense that he is, in 2016, he was not prepared for the presidency. Perhaps he didn't expect it, but he certainly wasn't prepared. Now there is this whole body of policy that is being thrust upon him by a series of institutes in America. And of course, you can look at the domestic policy about what he wants to do about immigrants, what he wants to do about people who are poor, and you can worry about that, about what is happening internally to America. But I have never wanted to interfere in domestic politics of another country. But what we have got to think about, and I'm afraid we've got to speak about is the threat to the rest of the world. Now, he says he could solve the Ukraine-Russian problem in a day. But if the Ukraine-Russian problem is solved at the expense of Ukraine and is seen as a victory for Putin, then the blow to European self-confidence will be absolutely massive. And that's why I keep saying to my European friends, that we have got to continue to support Ukraine. We cannot allow a situation to develop where people feel that with impunity you can take over another sovereign state, and we allow it to happen. And so we will have to put more resources into supporting Ukraine. Of course, they will have to make some changes as well, but we cannot allow a Russian victory. And obviously, if President Trump thinks that a solution in a day is a concession, then I don't think we could ever support that.